What's going on? Welcome back to another video. Now in this video we are going to be talking about building an app that does speech to text. So in other words, this is going to be an app that's going to take some kind of an audio or a video media file and convert it into text. And so we're going to be building this app all in Bubble, but we're going to be using something else in order to do the whole logic, the whole the interesting things. And so let me show you an example of an app that already does this. There's a big market for apps, such as the one we're going to be building today, for many users. So here we have ref.com. This is not my app. This is an app that I found, and I use this from time to time in some of my projects. And this app converts audio and video to text. Humans working side by side with the best speech-to-text AI. And so our app that we're going to be building is going to be very, very similar to this app. Specifically, it's going to be using very state-of-the-art speech-to-text AI. And how exactly are we going to be doing speech-to-text AI? Well, you can have humans do it. You can have a manual process that does it. But we're going to be doing something else. More specifically, we're going to be using services from Microsoft. And this is Microsoft's Azure platform. And this is very similar to AWS, which is Amazon's web services. It's also very similar to Google's Google Cloud offering. And so a lot of these big companies, in fact, most of these big companies, they have their own offerings that allow you to plug into their network with, with a lot of expertise, a lot of knowledge. And so you don't have to go out and you don't have to do these very difficult tasks, shall we say. You can just make requests to the service and you can build an API on top of it. You can build your app. In fact, I would probably guess this product here is probably using something like this. If not Microsoft's offering, it's probably using Google's offering or maybe Amazon's offering. And so that is what we're going to be using today. And so this is Microsoft Azure. They have a lot of services, but the service we're going to be using is called Azure Cognitive Services, okay? This is a comprehensive family of AI services and cognitive APIs to help you build intelligent apps. And so if you scroll down, they basically tell you exactly what you can do with this specific suite of services. You have these decision services. You can make smarter decisions faster. You have a language, extract meaning from unstructured text. You also have vision, identify and analyze content within images and videos. And last but not least, this is what we're going to be using today. This is speech. Integrate speech into apps and services. So we have speech to text, we have text to speech, speech translation, and speaker recognition. So what we're going to be using is this one right here, text to speech. We're going to be converting text to lifelike speech for more natural interfaces. And so this may sound very complex to some of you, especially to those of you who don't have much experience using these third-party web services, but I assure you, this is not as complex as it may seem. And I'm going to walk you step by step in order to build a very useful app that you can later on refine, add features, and create a very compelling product offering and even make some money with it as well. And so this is Azure Cognitive Services, okay? And more specifically, once we kind of dive a little bit deeper, we're going to be using a service called batch transcription, right? So here we are in Azure Cognitive Services, speech service. We're going to be using batch transcription. And the most important thing that you have to understand here is the API, right? What kind of calls are we going to be making? How does it all work? Because once you understand the API, things get a lot easier, right? Of course, when you're reading all this documentation, you may be a little bit overwhelmed. But as soon as you get to the API, like I'm here, things get a little bit simpler, a little bit more straightforward. So let's take a look at this API. We have several calls here. We have a create a new subscription API. We have retrieve a list of transcriptions, create a new transcription. You can get a list of supported locales. We don't really care about that. The API calls that we care about is this call right here, create a new transcription. retrieve a list of transcriptions, and we also care about this one right here. This last one gets the list of files of the transcription identified by the given ID. Basically, these three ones. An optional one, well, not really an optional, a useful one is to delete the specified transcription task. So let me explain to you how this works. Let's go in and let's draw this diagram, okay? Very, very simple. We have our Bubble app here, right? This is Bubble. Okay, this is the UI. Bubble by itself is not going to be doing the translation. It's simply creating the UI and it's creating the user experience. Under the hood, we're going to be calling various APIs. This is Microsoft's Azure services. I'm just going to call it MS, which stands for Microsoft, right? So we're going to be calling Microsoft in the backend, and we are going to be getting responses back to Bubble. And specifically, we're going to be working with 3 API calls, okay? So if we go back here, we're going to be creating a new transcription. We're going to be retrieving a list of transcriptions. I'm going to explain to you why this flow is very important. And then we're also going to be getting the result of the transcription. Okay, so if I go back here, we are going to be creating this transcription. Then we're going to get a result. Next, we are going to get a list of transcription, L for list. And then we're going to get a result. And then last but not least, we are going to get the files. This is the result, right? I'm just going to call it F. But this is really the end result, and we're going to get a result. So we're talking about 3 calls, 3 requests, and 3 responses. And you can also delete the transcription, but this is, it's not required to get the system working, but it is good practice to delete it. I delete these transcriptions in my own app. So this is very, very good practice. So now that you understand the basic flow, let me show you a really great tool that you can use that allows you to send these requests and understand how they work. And once I show you this, we are going to go back into Bubble and we're actually going to build this app. It's very, very important for you guys to understand the whole flow here, because it's gonna save you a lot of time once you go into Bubble and once you're going to start building the app. Okay, and so if you Google for API documentations, API reference for cognitive services, you're going to have a really nice kind of sandbox where you can send requests. Well, not really a sandbox, but really a UI where you can send all kinds of requests, and you can delete, you can post, you can do get, you can do a lot of interesting things. Essentially, these are these requests here, right? So you're seeing these requests. You can do them right from the UI. And this is very, very useful, because if we didn't have this, we would have to go out and use a third-party tool, and it's going to be a mess, and it's going to be a little bit complicated. So what we're going to do is we're going to issue a sample request, and then we're going to ask the system what's happening. We're going to ask for status, and then I'm going to go into Bubble, and I'm going to show you how to build this app together. We're going to bring everything together. And so what we're looking for is this request here. This is the first request. This is the create transcription request. So if we go in here, we have to select the region. Okay, we're going to select East US because that is the region I have configured in my account. Now, before you can actually use Microsoft's Azure services and actually use the system, you have to obviously create an account. And so if you go into cloud computing here, create a free account. Once you do that, you're going to be at a screen that looks something like this. This is my Azure Services dashboard. And as you can see, I have a lot of resources because I've been using Azure for quite a while now. I think a little bit more than a year, 2 years experimenting, building all kinds of apps. And so, you know, I have some experience with it. But do not worry about these resources. The only resource you need is this one right here, this first resource, called Cognitive Services. I have a speech 03. And so in order to do that, you just click on this plus sign, you search for cognitive, you type cognitive here, Cognitive Services, and then you press create. Okay, that's all you have to do. Now, once you do that, you're going to see it here, comment here, and then you're going to go to keys and endpoint, and you're going to have your API keys. That is it. You don't need to know any of this stuff. It's not important for the purpose of this tutorial. All you need to know is this key right here, and the location is East US because that is where I'm based. And so we have this key 1 here, and so I can copy it to clipboard, I'm gonna build a brand new app. I'm just gonna call this voice, or actually MS Microsoft, let's see, Azure app, something like this. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna append the year, and we're gonna say this is external, this is SaaS, start a business, create new app. Okay, and so now it's building kind of the template for the app we're gonna be building in a second. And all we have to do is create the UI and create the API calls, and your app is pretty much ready. And you can have a really nice app. We're gonna start with a blank page. We are gonna close the assistant. And now we have to design the UI. And so the idea I have is we're gonna have a text field here with some instructions or the name of the app. So we can say voice transcription service. We can have something like this. You can make it, we're gonna fix it up a little bit later. I just want to get this app functional first. We're gonna have an input, and the input is gonna be the URL. So I'm gonna come in here, URL, enter URL. Okay, and then we need a button. So I'm gonna take this button here. We have this URL, and then I have a button. So the button is gonna say transcribe. Okay, very, very simple. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. Let's make it 20. Okay, or yeah, that looks pretty good, 18. Okay, so now we have the first page. Okay, now what this is gonna do, this is gonna make that first request. Okay, this is gonna make that first request to create transcription. So we need to go into plugins. We need to install an API plugin here. I'm going to install an API plugin. This is the first plugin, API connector. We installed it. And now what we want to do is we want to add another API. We're going to choose this. The name of this API family, and we're going to have like 3 or 4 calls in there, is going to be called Cognitive Services, or you can call it even Azure Cognitive Services. We're going to expand the first API call, and this is going to be called create transcription. Okay, and so what we have to do now is we have to go back to this page, find create transcription, and just copy the data, copy the format, copy everything. I'm going to pick East US always. And all we need to do now is basically copy. This is a post request, so I'm just going to line it up here. I'm going to go in here. Remember, this is a post request. And remember, you have to put it as an action, okay? That way you can use it inside your workflows, because if you have it as data, it's not going to show up in your workflows, okay? So this is a post. We're going to copy the URL. This is the URL right here. We just copy and paste. I'm going to copy the URL. And we need a couple of headers here. The first header is going to be the content type application JSON. And another header is going to be this authentication key, so that, you know, only authorized people can, you know, see what's happening with my transcriptions. So we're going to copy this. We're going to paste. This is private. We're not going to change this. And then we need the key. So I'm going to go into my dashboard here. I'm going to copy the key. We're going to go back here, paste this key. It's also going to be private because there's no reason to change it from the front end. And we also need the body. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to copy this, paste it as a body. I'm going to delete this URL. And what I want to do is I want to enter it. I want to put as this URL as a parameter, right? So I'm going to put URL as a parameter. Once I do that, I have this URL here, which is going to take it, which is going to be filled in from the main page. So we have the URL. I'm just going to put, you can call it URL, or you can call it, you know, voice URL, audio URL, something like this. Audio URL, something very, very simple. It's not going to be private because we're going to be working on it. I can enter a value, and the value I'm going to use, I want to enter a value just for testing. Okay, this is the value I want to enter just for testing, because you always have to initialize the call. And so we want to double check, create transcription action JSON post. We don't have any parameters in here because we have a body, we have a parameter here. we're going to hit initialize call. And hopefully we're not going to get an error message. And looks like we're not getting an error message. In fact, we're seeing not started, which means it was executed successfully. So we're going to hit save. And now the first request is done. So we're going to go back to the UI. We're going to go to the button, start edit workflow. Click here to add an action. We're going to go into plugins and we're going to choose this create transcription. And this audio URL is actually going to be taken from the main page. Let's give it a nice name for this input parameter, input URL. Okay, now we can go to workflow, go in here, and insert dynamic data, input URL value. Okay, so now it's working fine because it's essentially executing this create transcription with the URL we provided. So this is going to be working fine. We're going to test it in a second as well. But what we want to do is we want to redirect it to another screen. And on this screen, we're going to show the statuses of various transcriptions that are happening. Okay, so we're going to come in here. We're going to do navigation, go to page, and this is going to be a brand new page. We're going to create a new page, and we're going to call this transcriptions. And this is going to be a list of transcriptions with their statuses, their names, when they were started, etc., etc. We're going to hit create. And now we're going to go in here. Destination is going to be transcriptions. Okay, so let's go back. Let's go into our transcriptions page. And this is an empty page. And this page is going to issue a request, the second request, which is going to get a list of transcriptions. So, that user might have multiple transcriptions. It may have only one transcription happening at once. We do not know, and in fact, it's not really important. What's important is we need to list the whole transcriptions here. So we're going to go back to plugins, and we are going to have another API call. We're going to collapse this one. We're going to add another API call, and this is going to be get transcriptions. And so as the same with the previous, we're going to go all the way down, get transcriptions here, and we are going to copy and paste everything we need to do, the parameters. So this is actually very, very simple. Here's our request URL. This is a get request. We're going to paste this, use as data, because we're going to be getting data back, right? We're going to be getting data back so that we can display this data. And we also have some headers. And it's the same thing. This subscription key, we're going to come in here. We're going to paste it. And the value I'm going to get from my dashboard here, we're going to paste it here. This is going to be private. And that's all we need to do. Now we can initialize it. Hopefully it's going to work. And looks like we're getting some data back with the various transcriptions, right? And in fact, let me just clarify what we need to know. We're going to have a get transcriptions value because we're essentially getting a list. And this list is essentially our transcriptions. So we're going to hit save. And now we are ready to display that data, right? So how are we going to display it? We're going to display it using a repeating group. We're going to make it fairly big here. And then we're going to, show a bunch of things. So this is type of content. Is get transcriptions value, data source is get data from an external data source, get transcriptions, close. We have that, and now we can display the various fields. Let's go into our text here. We're going to drag it right on this line. And the first thing we want to display is insert dynamic data value. And the value we want to say is created date time. How about this one? Copy, paste. We're going to come in here. And we are going to say this is going to be status maybe. Or actually display name, the name of the transcription, if we specified something. And then we're going to have the status. Okay? Display name, we're going to change it to a status. And all of these should say completed. All of these transcriptions, because they're all fairly small jobs. And so let's preview this and let's see what it looks like. Is our table working? Did we configure everything correctly? And so here's our table. As you can see, everything is working. Each of these transcriptions is different. The different start, created date, the names are the same. We're just using the default name. We can change that. You can change that later on when you're creating new transcriptions. and all of them are succeeded. The other thing you want to do is you want to fix it up a little bit. Maybe put the text here. We can call it created time. Then you can copy and paste. Here you can call this name, and then copy and paste, and this could be status, just so that it looks a little bit better. Okay, so let's preview this. What do we have here? Created time, name, and status. Very, very simple. And last but not least, what we want to do is we need some kind of a button that will, get the data, right? So we want to make it a little bit bigger. And so the idea is we want to get the data. There's a couple of ways of doing it. You can display it right here, or you can have a link that's going to redirect them to the other page, and that page is going to display the data. So let's do that. It's really up to you how you want to do it. It doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a button here, and this button is going to redirect to the third page, and that page is going to have the actual content there, the actual transcription, if you will, the actual text there, okay? So we're going to call this, I don't know, let's see, get text, or text, just text, whatever you want. We're going to have text, start and edit workflow, and we are going to navigate to a new page. This is going to be a new page, and we're going to call this result. Okay, result, create. We're going to go in here, result. Now, the data that we want to send, this is very important, is we want to send the ID. We want to send the ID of the actual element, because the actual ID of the transcription, because then we can take that ID and get the actual text with it, right? So the data we want to send to this page, we want to go into value, we want to go into self, and we don't want to send the whole self, because self, right, if we go back to our our results, right, if we do this, let's say I come in here and I do get transcriptions, okay, and I enter my key, just to show you the kind of data you're going to be dealing with. Very important to understand, right? If I send this request, the response I'm going to get is all this, and self is this one right here, right? This is self, right? Remember, this is what we have here. This self here is this self here. We don't want to send all of this. We only want to send that last part, okay? And this is very, very important to do. We only want this. Now, how do you do that? Well, very simple. You're going to go in here, and you're going to extract with regex. Regex stands for regular expressions, and that is what we have to extract. And so, because the actual ID looks something like this, we have to enter a very specific regex. So if you take a look, we have, what do we have? We have eight digits here. We have 4, 4, 4, and 12, right? So the way you want to do it is you want to do something like this, S, and this is the full regular expression that you want. You want 8 characters, we want 4, 4, and 4, and then we want 12. That is all we want. And we're going to close this, and then you can say, you have to say something, because it's basically a list of text, but because we're only going to get one value, we can say first item, or you can say last item. Doesn't matter, it's going to be the exact same thing. And now, when we click on that button, we are going to be passing the ID, only the ID of the transcription, not the whole URL. And let me show you what I mean. So if I go back to the design, if I go to the result page, and let's say I want to display the actual value I'm getting, I'm going to drag this text. And this is also good for debugging. We're going to insert dynamic data, and we're going to say get data from page URL. We want the path, because we're sending it as a path variable. And now let's see if it's only going to show up the, if it's only going to pass the ID, right? So we're going to go back to transcriptions. We're going to run this app. It's going to show all our transcriptions. We're going to hit text. It's redirecting us, and now we're only seeing the ID. And this is exactly what we want. And so let's look at a couple of other transcriptions so that we're seeing different IDs. So as you can see, this is a different ID. I'm going to hit back. And this last one should be different again. This is different again. So now that we have the ID, we can issue that last API call in order to get the actual data, in order to get the actual text. And this API call is this call right here. If we go back to the app, this is the API. We want to issue this get transcription files. This is what we want to do. And this is what that last page is going to be doing. So we're going to go back to this. We are going to go to the design for the result. So we're going to go back here. We're going to go to the result. And we need to go to the plugins. And we need to enter another API request. We have two. We need to enter a new one. So this is going to be called, we're going to call this get, this is going to be called get transcription files. I think that's what it's calling it. Let's scroll down, get transcription files, perfect. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to come in here and we are going to be issuing a get request. Here's the URL. As you can see, it needs that ID there. And we already know that ID because we're passing specifically that ID. We already have access to that variable. And so it's going to be very easy. What we want to do is we want to do something like this, ID, and then we're going to pass it inside the app, inside the workflow, right? We have this. What else do we need to do? We need the ID in the query parameter, which we're passing, and we need that authentication key. We're going to come in here. We're going to add a header. We're going to copy and paste that authentication key here. This is private. This is not going to be private because we're going to work with it outside the app, outside the screen, I mean. We have the ID and we have the value. And for testing, we need some kind of a value. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our app. We are going to go, I'm going to open it up. We're going to duplicate real quick. Duplicate the tab here. And we are going to run the app and we're going to get an ID. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to transcriptions because we need to send this request so that it's Bubble knows what to do with it. We're going to run this and we're going to get this one ID here. We're going to go back here and we are going to paste it here. Okay. So now when we initialize it, remember this is going to be data JSON ID. We're going to hit initialize. And what are we getting? We are getting some values here. Okay. And so we are getting this content URL, and this URL is going to have the text, right? We're going to hit save. And now now this request is complete, this get transcription files. So now what we want to do is, so on this page right here, we no longer care about this ID. We want to actually show the data. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go in, we're going to have a text here, but this text is going to insert dynamic data, get data from an external URL, and we are going to do get transcription files. Now there's the default value here. Instead of having this default value, we're going to insert dynamic data, get data from page URL as a path parameter. We're going to hit that. And now we are going to be getting that data. Now, what do we need from that data, right? We have values. Let's go back to our API call and let's see. So I'm going to enter the ID here and I'm going to enter my authentication key as well. And let's take a look at what the response looks like. So this is the response. What we need is we need this file here. This is the key here. So we have values. We have an array of values. We need the second, the last item, the second element here, and we need links content URL. So we're going to go back here. We have values. So I'm going to say last item, and then we need links content URL. Perfect. And now we're going to have the URL of the text that the user can click on and get the text of the actual their transcription. Okay. So we're going to go back to our transcriptions. We're going to run this app again. Okay. So here's our app running. We're going to come click on this and here's the URL. Now this URL, if we open it, right, if we copy it and run it, we are going to have the results, right? So we're going to, if we execute this URL, we are going to have the results, right? And so we can have the user do it. We can have a link. So for instance, we can have something like this. Let's go back to our, let's close this. Let's go to our results. Let me show you what I mean. So this could actually be a link, right? I can have a link, and instead of, you know, something like this, I can just copy all of this, copy expression, come here. This is dynamic data, and we can have, let's do it from scratch, insert data, get transcription files. Let's do this, insert dynamic data, get data from URL. This is going to be a path parameter. And remember, guys, this is going to be last item here, and this is going to be links content URL. And now we have a link. Okay, now we have a link. They can click on it. They can also view it if they want. Let's see if that works. Transcriptions, we're going to hit preview. And let's click on this transcription here. And now we have a link. So if I click on this link, I'm going to be on the screen where I'm going to see the data. But this, it's not really, it doesn't provide a lot of ease of use. It's not very intuitive, this whole flow. And so what we want to do is we want to actually display this text. What we want really is this combined record phrases. We want this first channel here. There are two channels because this is this is stereo, as I explained before. And we want the display because this display has a lot of formatting. It has punctuation. It even capitalized some terms, which is kind of what we want because it's called display. This is what we want to display. And so what we want to do is we want to execute another API call. We want to execute, and we want to only display this. Essentially, we want to call this URL, and we only want to extract this display here, right? And so in order to do that, this is kind of our final step, right? We're going to go in here. We're going to close this up, and we are going to go back to our results, and we're going to delete this. This is the URL. We're going to leave it maybe for debugging purposes, but we're going to remove it in the final version. And so what we want to do is we're going to go into plugins, and we want to create another API call, okay? Because we need to create another API call. We cannot display all of this to the user. We only want to display this. And for that, we need to create another API call. So I'm going to create another API call, and I'm going to call this get data, right? And what is it going to do? It's going to execute that URL, right? It's going to call this URL here. And this URL is going to be a parameter because we do not know that URL right now. It's a dynamically generated URL. We're going to discover it while the app is running. And we're going to run that. And then we are going to capture, what we need, right? So here's what I mean, right? This is not going to be private. The value is going to be this URL. So I'm going to paste it here just for testing. We're going to replace this live. We do not need any headers at all because it's already assigned URL. And so we're going to initialize call. Okay, and now we're going to see the data. So as you can see, it says display. And once we do that, Bubble knows about all these data types. And now we can use these data types when we're actually building the app, when we're actually displaying. So what we want is this display here. I'm going to hit save. And now we're good to go. So now we're going to go back here. We're going to drag another text field. We're going to leave that first one for debugging purposes. And what we want to do is we want dynamic data. We want to get data from an external API. And we want to use get data. Now, the URL is going to get it from another call, right? So instead of using this URL, actually let's use this URL. Just for testing purposes. Remember, we want combined, what do we want? We want combined record phrases, first record, display, right? So let's see if that works. Combined, we want first item, and we want display, right? So you should display it now. Let's go back here. Let's go into transcriptions, preview this. And let's see if it's working. We're going to hit this. And there you go. This is the result. This is what we want, right? This is exactly what we want. It's hard-coded right now. We need to get it dynamically. We need to get this URL. We should be using this URL. This URL is generated dynamically. That URL that we're using here is hard-coded. So let me show you how we can do that. We're going to go back into results. We're going to go in here. And what we want to do is we're going to clear all of this. We're going to start from the beginning. We're going to say insert dynamic data, get data from an external API, get data. And instead of this URL, we want to create another call to get that URL, right? So get data from an external API, get transcription files. We are going to specify our parameter, path, close. Now we have get transcription files. And remember, we need to actually get the right data. So let me double check what we have here. Let's go back to our cognitive search. And what we want to do is we have this request. Remember, this is get transcription files. We want values. We want second values. We want that last item, links, content, URL. This is the URL. So if we go back here, we want values, we want last item, and then we want links, content, URL. And that is all we have. Next, we want get data. We want combined. Let me double check. We want combined. We want that. We want the first channel or the last channel, doesn't really matter, and we want display. So we're gonna go in here. We want to do first item, and we want to do display, and that is it. And essentially, what I'm doing here is I'm making two calls. We're making two API calls with the first API call using the data from the previous, with the second API call using the data from the previous. I hope that makes sense. So let's try this out. Let's go into transcriptions here. Let's preview this. Let's run this. See if it's working. We're gonna hit on this, and are we getting our text? We are getting our text. You saw it took a little bit of time. It took a couple of seconds because we're issuing multiple requests. So here's the debugging URL, and here's the text. And it's going to be the same URL because we essentially have the same transcription, but rest assured, it's pulling up. We have the same recording in all of these transcriptions, but rest assured, we are using different data. And the way I can tell you that is because if I preview this, take a look at this. If I preview this, you're going to see different ID here. As you can see, it's a different ID, 03, and you see that 03 ending in BA79, ending in 7B7, right here, 7B7. And you're going to have these different numbers here, right? So if I go back to the screen, you're going to have different results. So if I come in here, that last one, we have a different transcription here. We have F9, 9F6, ending in E466, but it's the same. It's the same data in the transcription. That is why you're seeing the same data. And so this app now works as intended. And so the whole flow of it from the beginning to end is you can come to this page here, enter the URL of the file that you want to transcribe. You're gonna go to transcribe. Once you do that, you're gonna be on this page here. You're gonna come in here. You're gonna be on the transcriptions page. And so you're going to see this page here with a lot of these statuses. And then depending on where you are, whether it's succeeded or not, you can click on this button and it's going to pull up the actual text. It's going to take a couple of seconds and it's actually going to pull up the text. Now, obviously, you can refine this app. You can do a lot of interesting things, but all of the design, all of the refinement is really beyond the scope of this video. And this is really what I wanted to show you, how to combine the power of Microsoft Azure with all of these services, these very, very powerful services. And in fact, this is just one of many services that they offer with Bubble so that you can create a really, really high quality app without writing a single line of code. All right, guys, so this is all I wanted to show you in today's video. I really hope you've gotten value here. Let me know below. Definitely support this video and support this channel by leaving a comment below. Feel free to tell me if you like this video, if you didn't like this video. I'm open to all kinds of comments, all kinds of constructive criticism. Definitely like this video to show your support and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Also, let me know in the comment section below what kind of video you want to see next. What kind of problems are you struggling with? and that's going to give me better ideas for future videos. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in a future video.